Armed Forces Remembrance Day is celebrated on the 15th of January every year. We're joined this morning by the Chief of Defense Staff, General Lucky Irabor. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you.
And it's an honor to have you here.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, Armed Forces Remembrance Day is a day of high significance, not just to the Nigerian Armed Forces, but to all Nigerians. Would you say that the way we have celebrated it as a country has put in context the significance which it carries?
Well, thank you. First and foremost, let me appreciate this platform that you've given to me to further appreciate our men and women who are working day and night to ensure that not only peace returns to our country, but the entire nation is safe. As you know, the Armed Forces is responsible for the territorial integrity of our nation and giving greater support to the civil authority by virtue of the provisions of the Constitution. So in doing that, of course, men and women have paid the supreme price. And with respect to having to celebrate the sacrifices of our men and women who, of course, are engaged in this adventure, and, of course, especially for those who have paid the supreme price, I would say yes to a large extent. That, of course, there is nothing that you offer for those who have laid down their lives for the protection of the entire nation that can be too much. So it's in that light that whilst thanking Nigerians for the very valued support to the armed forces, that I'd like to crave for more. We can do better. We're doing well, no doubt, and I believe that we can do better.
When you say that we can do better, what areas precisely are you looking at?
Currently, I'm sure you know that we are engaged in various types of operation. And the one that is, of course, that is more daunting has to do with terrorism and insurgency, to which elements of banditry have complicated. And I'm glad that that, of course, has also been put in context by way of gazetting them as terrorists. And so to do this, which is something new and different from the conventional military duties, demands that support from the populace, the support from the citizens is increased. Not only by providing information, but also situating occurrences in a manner that does not, disparage the efforts of those who are engaged in this enterprise, but to give them some form of motivation and a sense that we enable them to say, look, we have the citizens behind us, so that the common enemy of the state, the common enemy of the people, can actually be focused on. But currently, I believe that there's still a number of grounds to cover in this area. Besides, of course, having to, once in a while, organize visits to those who are in the hospitals, those who are widows by virtue of the death of men and women of the armed forces who have paid the supreme price, by providing some form of succor to them, beyond, of course, what the military can provide. And I'm sure you know that every of our provisioning in terms of administration and logistics and welfare comes within the purview, within the budgetary provisions. And so, in the light of the fact that the budget cannot, provide all that is required, then of course you know that some other individuals, corporate organizations, and the larger society must be seized of this situation and then perhaps know where to come in, and that's precisely what we're saying.
Have you made efforts in that regard?
Of course,
to try and involve the private sector in the areas where you think that they can come in and assist the military? Of course,
it's a process. Sometimes you must also understand that as government security agency or the institution of such as the armed forces, there are limitations by way of having to go cap in hand. It's not, we're not beggars, and we don't intend, and that does not in any way say that the government is not doing enough. No, not at all. These are civic responsibilities. We do not need to go to canvass for them. In other climes, you don't go around, creating, programs to sensitize the populace. So it's in that light. I believe that Nigerians were obeying enough to understand that these are part and parcel of civil. I mean, we have great Nigerians who understand this, and that's actually the context in which I'm making the statements.
Well, General, I'm sure that you must appreciate Nigeria's history.
Correct.
With its military.
Correct.
And it's been a checkered history. Correct. At the minimum. And so sometimes that informs the relationship, and perhaps how I think we're still in the process of trying to straighten out that relationship. Correct. And it sometimes, evolves into how we eventually relate with the military. And that's why I'm asking certain questions. Correct. First, there are a number of things I'd like to ask with the significance of the new day which we have. We know that Armed Forces Remembrance Day was not always January the 15th. Right. Nigeria specifically moved hers to the 15th of January for a reason. Yes. First and foremost, maybe I should say some of it so that our viewers are not lost. For those who are not very aware, it was also to commemorate the end of the Civil War. Correct. And where the Nigerian military was able to, win back the unity of this country. Correct. We're still seeing issues that continue to confront us with regards to the unity of our country. Correct. How would you say that the significance of the day is brought to bear on the everyday Nigerian? Because for a number of people, this is only happening within government circles. This emblem, which we all wear, we have tried to wear to encourage the rest of the public to wear them. I do not know that a lot of people understand the significance of this emblem. Would you say that there is significant awareness on the part of the Nigerian, on the generality of the populace, on the sacrifices that our military have, made to keep this country where it currently is?
Well, thank you. I'm glad that you actually brought out the significance of this day, how Nigeria moved the Armed Forces Remembrance Day to the 15th of January. You're right that as part of the global community, you know that the Armed Forces of Nigeria is an offshoot of the colonial arrangement. And so because we took part in the various world wars and both First and Second World Wars, of course, there was an arrangement to have what we call 11/11, that is 11th of November of every year, to commemorate this kind of thing, especially for the Commonwealth countries. And so when, of course, we had the challenge of the Civil War, and it ended on the 15th of January 1970, I'm sure you know, of course, just like Nigerians, most Nigerians know, that war, that's Nigerian Civil War, which was fought for over 3.5 years, ended on the 15th of January by, by the force of submission of their surrender, instrument of surrender to the then head of state. And so we felt that given that the unity of Nigeria was won back, and I'm glad and I want to thank you for that, was won back by the armed forces at the time, that we have something to celebrate back home here. That not just joining the global community, but equally to signify something that is national. And that actually marks the beginning of the celebration of the Armed Forces Remembrance Day on the 15th of January of every year. Well, with respect to whether Nigerians actually appreciate the significance, I'm sure you know that our history is also something that needs to be escalated in terms of teaching of our history. I'm sure you also know that issues that have to do with civic responsibilities still requires a little push. I'm sure you know that the literacy level in the nation still requires a little push. And so when you bring all these factors among several other things, you know that quite a lot of work needs to be done. But it's like asking what, within the scale of preference, what should be our focus in terms of engaging in core military duties and other allied things that have to do with educating the populace for them to know that this is the significance of this day. I believe that if you bring all the agencies of government, that military may not be the best to be suited to bring this understanding to bear to Nigerians. And that also links up to the earlier, the rider that you gave, by virtue of this question, which has to do with military involvement in politics. I believe that that's what you try to bring out, and what impression many Nigerians have with that kind of our past history. And so sometimes those who have very strong reservations regarding military involvement in politics of the past may not actually give room for the escalation of discussions that have to do with repositioning the military, bringing the military to full focus in terms of what good they brought to this nation. But be that as it may, today I believe that Nigerians are no longer in doubt as to the subordination of the military to civil rule. I believe that no one is in doubt that democracy has come to stay. I believe that no one is in doubt any longer that the current military leadership, and of course since the democratization in 1999, that the military is well focused to perform its constitutional roles. And so going forward, I believe that some of these misperceptions that some Nigerians have had with respect to military engagement will begin to change. And I'm very hopeful that by virtue of some of the plans and programs that we're engaged in currently, that quite good holds for us as we go through the years ahead.
Let's flip this now to my colleagues in Lagos. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Mark. Well, good morning, General Irabor. Good to see you. Well, yes, much as you've highlighted some of the things that need to be done in schools to ensure we ramp up that knowledge, relationship, significance of the Armed Forces Remembrance Day. But speaking to people out there yesterday, today, they just don't have that kind of connection that I think the Armed Forces or the country likes to see, such that they almost, for want of words, own it. So do you think that there's something that armed forces, soldiers who we will see on a regular basis on the roads out there can do to improve that relationship, such that that understanding and that rapport between civilians and the military can improve, such that when we hear the Armed Forces Remembrance Day, it rings a bell within us?
Well, thank you, Chamberlain, for that question, and I'd like to appreciate the context that you just provided. No doubt that quite a lot that we can do, the soldiers on the street can do. Training is a process, and training for us and the armed forces is a continuous one. Issues that have to do with public relations. That is, when I'm talking about public relations, not in terms of the narrative that is given, that is your relationship with those that that you serve, your comportment when you come before them by virtue of your duties, your engagement in your duties, is something that I believe that must be properly situated, and then given the dynamics of the society, reassessing, reevaluating, and then incorporating them in the training process itself. So yes, I agree that there are quite a lot that we need to do, but I want to believe that given the interactions, the constant interaction we now have with the public, in the light of the internal security operation engagement that we have, wherein nearly all the 36, in fact, there is no state of the Federation where you don't find military presence on the street, doing police duties, That, of course, must have brought some form of coalition. Not just must have, that is precisely what has brought a good number of our personnel along the coalition course with many Nigerians. And so in that context, they more or less think that the military, the techniques, tactics, and procedures for the military to engage with the public should be the same with that of the police. And sometimes it becomes difficult to begin to educate, to begin to make them understand that, look, a military man is an armed man, is a man whose training is completely different, his orientation is completely different. We then bring ourselves out on the streets, and that's why we must continue to advocate that peace return to every part of this country, so that the military, of course, will return to their core duties and leave the police and other civil security agencies to do their job. But that does not also imply that our being called out for military duties is something that is out of place. No, it has constitutional backing. And so because we're engaged in this manner, we also have to continuously reevaluate our engagement. And I'm sure you are aware that we have, civil military relations department, not just in the defense sector, but across the services, Army, Navy, and the Air Force. You also know that by virtue of this engagement that we have had to review some of our, dealings with the populace by having, a human rights desk in offices, in the headquarters, and all the formations and units across the armed forces. These are new inventions, these are new creations that we have had to in place in order to give effect to the requirement for us to give greater support to ensuring that the rights of Nigerians that we come across now on a daily basis by virtue of our operational engagement that are well understood, and also to make those who we partner with, talking about other stakeholders, to let them into some of our core values, some of our core areas of engagement, for an understanding, for them to be able to work with us, and then, of course, carry out the job of educating the larger populace to understand, where the differences lie. When the military is engaged in policing duties and when the police is engaged in their traditional duties. So, in sum, I would say yes, we still have some work to do, and we are doing them, and we will continue. But then, on the long run, we believe that peace, as we move further in the year is still very young. I see hope. I see that peace certainly will return to every part of this country, and that will, of course, give us some respite, and then we'll begin to reevaluate our engagement and to see how we could redirect our efforts to ensuring that the territorial integrity of this nation is kept intact. And so that's the reason why I've taken time out to come to the studio, which is also part of our commitment to appreciating our troops that are in the front line, and also to appreciate our forebears, to let them know that their sacrifices are not in vain, and that we'll continue to give them all the support that is required to ensure that they live a fulfilled life.
General, just a quick one. I mean, is there any law or anything that's out there such that when civilians are seen in camouflage, do they violate any law? Because usually we just see the military go really hard on such people, just as an aside.
Well, I'm glad that you asked that question, Chamberlain. We live in a very peculiar society. I do not need to restate what the makeup of our society, what it is, what the level of, if you like, discipline is generally. And when you compare it to some places, some other climes, where a few individuals believe that whatever practice go on in those society, then it should be replicated here. They discount the other elements of social life in those society. They do not bring that to bear right here. So with that in mind, the criminals amongst us have had to take advantage of the military gears, military, police, and of course other security agencies, their gears to perpetrate a crime. Whereas ordinarily, we will be glad to see that our symbol is being used for good causes. But Chamberlain, I can tell you that a good number of those who use them have used them for ignoble causes. And so that brings us to a state where you begin to make certain assumptions. So it is better for you to be safe first, then by virtue of your investigations, you can exonerate those who are using them for good causes. So this is where we are. But I believe that as we make progress as a people, as a nation, as we make progress with our awareness programs, with our understanding of what statehood is, as we make progress with the understanding as to what national security issues are, then of course these settings will be properly put in context, and appropriate actions will be taken at all levels to ensure that Nigerians do not see us in very bad light, especially when they wear military gears. Currently, I'm sure you are aware that as part of what we're doing, we are engaging with different stakeholders. We have those who have engaged with us to appreciate our men and women that are serving through a program called A Tribute to Our Troops, and of course using that platform also to have a few celebrities, those who we could call role models, to begin to advance some of these values that we think must permeate into the society. And a good number of them, of course, have also spoken to me to say, look, these gears that you've given to us, even when we try to display them, you find some of your men at various checkpoints having to ask us questions about them. I say, yes, of course, that will be, but then with some form of courtesy, you will not be manhandled. So these are issues that we are contending with, and I believe that we're going to make progress with them.
Well, General, there is the natural temptation to ask you operational questions and all of that, but today we just want to celebrate the military.
Feel free.
No, not today, General. We just want to celebrate the military because we owe the unity of Nigeria to the military. But one thing that touches one is the sustenance of the activities of the military over the years. That's why it's Armed Forces Remembrance Day. One of the ways in which growing up we remember the military was to see that unknown soldier from place to place in different parts of the country. So, and you've spoken to some efforts being made to sustain military-civilian relations, but I would like you to give us an idea, what kind of image would you want the Nigerian to have of the military, of the soldier, wherever they see him or her?
Hi, thank you so very much for that question. Maybe to answer you, the question to ask is this: what greater love than for a man to lay down his life for his friends, and in this context, for his fellow citizens? If we can answer that question by having to reflect in our consciousness, then of course it will be easier to have a self-advancement. That is, you bring yourself forward to appreciate those who have had to take up this onerous task of laying down their lives just for the love of the citizens and for the love of country. So I believe that Nigerians, even as they listen to me, and of course, not just only on this platform, as they also, get the sense that we're trying to promote, by virtue of this engagement through other, fora, then of course we will have been getting closer to the sense as to what we desire Nigerians to have with respect to this day, a day like this that we have set aside to remember members of the armed forces. But you see, 15th of January is only a day. But I believe that what actually will mean is a daily basis. It should be a daily occurrence. Just as we have our devotions on, for ourselves and families, I believe that there must be reflection during those devotion period for men and women who have laid down their lives so that each and every one of us can live our dreams in our nation. I do not think that is too much to do, and I'm glad that by virtue of the privileged position that I hold, that there are many Nigerians, millions of Nigerians who are engaged in this enterprise, praying for men and women of the armed forces, giving their support in one way or the other, especially for the widows and the orphans of our fallen heroes, to ensure that they do not regret, that they are also motivated. It must be the reason for, because the military, as it were, is an institution that is also dynamic. Many years ago, I was a young man. I was a young boy that joined the Nigerian Defense Academy, and of course, over the years, after my training and then commission, I grew through the years. Today, I'm the #1 soldier of the armed forces. And one day I'm going to exit. At the time of entry, there was someone just like me. And today, several years after, decades after, I'm here. And of course, in years to come, of course, I will be exit. There will be also. So it's a process. Now, what do we do for those who will need to come in? How do we motivate them? How do we bring them to have the mind to serve their country with such love that every one of us have exhibited over these years? This precisely is, what I believe should be done in order to motivate Nigerians that, look, there is a need for us to keep the territorial integrity of this nation intact. There is need for us to preserve the unity and cohesiveness that we have. And today is only the military that, in my view, that stand that position to, give that sense of national unity, because you cannot speak of sovereignty without the military. Military, for you to talk about a sovereign state, is a state that its territorial integrity is protected. It's the military that gives it that form. And so where you do not have, a professional armed force, I'm sure there are examples across the world that that anarchy is just knocking around them. So we do not want that here, and it's by virtue of the collective response, the collective action of Nigerians and of the various stakeholders that will enable us to get to that shape and form. So going forward, we want to see in a better appreciation of men and women of the armed forces in such a manner that they are motivated to do what they should. That does not imply that there are no other Nigerians in other walks of life who are not helping to contribute to the growth and development of our nation. No, that's not it at all. But it must be properly situated, and I think that Nigerians are well educated and well knowledgeable in that sense to be able to understand the context that we're making this presentation.
Well, General, you talked about us asking the motivation question the other time, and it would naturally tempt me to ask one or two operational questions, since you have asked us to feel free. First of all, the motivation for those who are in active service now, and motivation for those who may be interested in getting into the system, as you did as a young man many years ago.
Yeah, thank you. First is to appreciate, by virtue of encouraging those at the front lines, giving information, whenever you see them, appreciating them, by saying, look, you're doing a good job, please keep it up. And where we have not done well, also, point it out, but in a manner that somebody will know that you are, urging him to do better in a manner that does not disparage him. And then, of course, also encouraging, your neighbors to do the same. And, of course, also for corporate organizations to undertake certain corporate social responsibility projects that that target orphans and widows of men and women of the armed forces. And of course, where government programs, government supports need to be boosted, if those corporate organizations have the wherewithal to increase government effort by way of providing certain tools for work, then one will encourage. And then on our part, we will, even though we've been doing it in the past, but we hope to escalate it by undertaking tours to schools to engage with the younger ones, for them to take their career in the military, encourage them to take their career in the military, among several other things that we hope to do.
Well, General Irabor, I must reiterate how remarkable it is to really have you to speak to these issues. And still on the operational front, you earlier said, you referenced the, the designation of bandits as terrorists, and you said it was rightly done, really. And I imagine ever since this has been gazetted, has that changed your approach towards the bandits, whom we can now call terrorists? How much has that impacted?
Well, it's not like a switch. It's a process. But I like to, from the outset, tell you that, yes, a lot of engagements have been undertaken. Our tactics, techniques, and procedures for engaging the bandits have actually changed too. The weapon systems engagement, that is the deployment of different weapon systems, have also changed. And of course, within a very short time, you will see the impact of this engagement. Those who are involved, are talking about the bandits themselves, they are feeling the heat. I'm sure if you keep your ears very close to the ground, you will hear their rumblings. And going forward, I believe that peace certainly will return to every part of the country where they have had sway hitherto.
Two quick issues before I hand this back to Mark. I mean, you earlier on talked about how you want Nigerians to see the soldier, the military man or woman. And for a lot of people, the way they think or evaluate the military is based on the results. So today they hear that people have been rescued and they're like, way to go, military. And then the next they hear about abductions, killings, and the rest. But from an operational sense, just how difficult is it to battle insecurity in Nigeria? How peculiar is our own case for you?
Well, there are some of these issues that might not be appropriate to come to the public domain to speak to them. But let me say that asymmetric warfare, or if you like, asymmetric threats that we find currently are not easy to contend with. Besides, it is an approach where the entire society, that is whole of society engagement, that will be able to offset it. But you find that the assessment, akin to what you just said, is only zeroing in on the members of the armed forces, discounting other stakeholders that must be assessed. I do not run away from the fact that we are at the forefront of this fight, of this engagement. There's no doubt about it. And we stand tall to make our valuable input, and we remain so. But when those assessments are being done, it would appear that the duties of that of other lines of operation, or if you like, other stakeholders who must take very larger chunk of it, is not factored. And so this is the reason why I believe, as we undertake seminars and symposia, which we have also lined up for, that some form of awareness will come. I'm not in any way trying to remove the cap that has been worn on the military. No, not at all. But if you are an analyst, you must also know the range of those that are involved in a particular situation, and then understand their roles and responsibilities, and be able to know who has performed and who has not performed, who has performed optimally, who have performed suboptimally. So these are issues that I believe that in some other forum other than a public domain such as this, we can give greater thoughts to them. But I must tell you that the times and the engagements are challenging, and we are equal to the task. The interactions, the synergy that we have with, as it grows, with other stakeholders, especially those within the realm of defense and security and intelligence, is something that is laudable. But of course, outside the government security forces, there are those who are also involved. And don't also forget that we live within the global system. And so there must be engagement, of course, what you're doing. It might not be so obvious to you and to so many Nigerians. There are engagements that are outside of the shores of this nation that we're also undertaking to ensure that we have the best approach to problem solving in our land. So going forward, I'm sure it will keep getting better and better.
Chief, I'm just going to ask you quickly as we wrap up now, how would you describe collaboration amongst the military forces which you are overseeing?
I mean, it cannot be better than this. I mean, hitherto, of course, there have been issues, but like I said, it's a growing, it's life itself, it's dynamic, and then experiences you build on the experiences that you've had. So when we talk about lessons learned, it's by virtue of the lessons learned over the years that have now made us to get to where we are currently. It cannot be better than this. But of course, I believe that as we also go forward, we'll strengthen the synergy that now exists, and of course, greater good and greater results will come therefrom. I'm very proud of the men and women of the armed forces that I lead. I'm so proud of the service chiefs. I mean, the focus that they, all of us have been in it. We have also seen over the years what the challenges has been, and that's the reason why it is not a tough, a sell to make them buy into the need for us to work together, and that's precisely what has been done. So I'm glad that I'm here at this time.
Well, CDS, it was our honor to have you here in our studios. We honor the memory of those who have fallen. We have great respect for those who are currently serving, and we hope that you give them our best wishes as we celebrate Armed Forces Remembrance Day. We also hope that you will not shy away when next you're called upon, especially with regards to the current wars that we're fighting in our country. Security, as the President did say, is on the front burner, and it is on the front burner for many Nigerians. And we believe that you will continue to assure them as you continue to do the work to keep our country safe. Thank you very much for coming on Sunrise Elite this morning.
Thank you, and be assured of my readiness to be here anytime. And then to also thank Nigerians for the wonderful support they've given to us, and we crave for more. Thank you, and God bless.